I just recently got my hands on the ROG Ally Extreme Z1 and this thing is absolutely phenomenal, but it does have some drawbacks. So I'm going to get into that just a little bit later in this video. Before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of a story. Like, I've been wanting a handheld gaming console for as long as I can remember, right? And I didn't have the money or the funds to get myself something like a Steam Deck or like the latest gen possible, so I did what any reasonable human would do, and that is I went to the secondhand marketplace and I got myself the Z1 for about 8,000 Rand, right? So it is, you know, quite simply a steal when you think about it. This thing new costs around 15,000 Rand at some place like Incredible Connection, and the Steam Deck cost, well, very similar to that, right? So this was my best possible option that I could get, but was it actually worth it? Now, I've been using this thing for a few months, or 1 or 2 months now, and I've been playing games, I've been watching movies, I've been rigorously testing this thing up and down to see if it's actually worth it for somebody who wants to get into handheld gaming, and I think I have an answer. But you might not like it, or you might, I don't know, it all depends. So with that being said, let's actually get into the full review of the ASUS ROG Strix Ally Extreme Z1 or Z1. Damn, that's a long name. Why? Alright, so the Ally Extreme Z1, and this thing, quite simply put, is amazing in some ways, but very limiting in others. So before we get into the actual review, I want to actually show you the ports on this thing. This thing is quite interesting. So here on the right, there is a USB Type-C port, and right to the left of that, which right to the left, I know that didn't make sense, but to the left of that, you will get a long port. It almost looks like the old like iPhone or iPad ports, like charger ports, but it's definitely not that. It is a connector port for the Ally XG Mobile, which is an external graphics device for this handheld gaming console, essentially turning it into a gaming laptop. And the reason for that will be clear by the end of this video as to why that might actually be needed. Now, on this device, you have these two back buttons, which you can't really use unless you set it up. So that's kind of a stupid caveat. Either way, you have your normal buttons, your normal triggers, and the normal Xboxy type controller setup, and that's essentially it. A few buttons on the screen, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then you have the 7-inch 120 Hz LCD touchscreen on this specific model. I don't know if you get an OLED model or something, but this one has an LCD screen, which isn't the end of the world, to be honest, but either way, you know, it's obviously good to know. At the top, you also have a micro SD card slot, as well as a 3.5mm jack if you want to, you know, connect some headsets that's not Bluetooth or USB Type-C. The Ally Extreme Z1 has Windows 11 on it, which is very, very good in some ways, but also very limiting in other ways, and I'm going to get into that, well, right now. So, because it has Windows 11, you can essentially do anything that you would do on a computer, right? You can play normal PC games, you can do whatever you want to do, you know, browse the internet, just normal Windows stuff, like any other laptop or anything like that. But there's kind of a problem with that. First of all, a handheld gaming console like the Steam Deck has a dedicated operating system just made for gaming. It has SteamOS, whereas this has the whole Windows 11 on it, which means it's naturally going to use more performance just to run the operating system than something like the, you know, SteamOS. But it wouldn't be too much of a problem if you're not planning on doing extremely heavy gaming and playing extremely new and modern games. It can handle it, let's be fair. It can handle most of the games. I've played Battlefield 6 on this, I've played Forza Horizon 5 on it, I've played Counter-Strike on it, I've played Warframe on it. It does run all of the above, and it does run them pretty smoothly, except for Battlefield 6. Yet again, I'll get into that just a little bit later. The reason it can run most of these modern games is because it has an up to 5.1 GHz 8-core 16-thread processor with RDNA 3 graphics, 16 GB of RAM, and this variant has 512 GB of very fast NVMe storage. I think one of the biggest limiting factors of this is obviously the graphics. Yes, it is RDNA 3 graphics, but it's still built-in graphics, like an APU essentially, right? So it can play a game like Forza Horizon 5 on like low to medium graphics pretty smoothly, like 30 to 50 FPS, very, very easily. It can run a game like CS2 fairly smoothly yet again, and a game like Warframe very, very smoothly. But when it comes to games like Battlefield, that's where it kind of hits its limit. I've only managed to get on low graphics with FSR enabled, something around the lines of 40, 50 FPS, sometimes hitting that 60 mark, but not all times, which isn't the end of the world. It's still playable at some degree, but it does have a lot of limiting factors baked into that. The thing is, this handheld gaming console, it gets warm, like really, really warm, especially when you're playing a game like Battlefield, right? And it gets so warm that the charging port doesn't even want to work anymore. It kind of just shuts it off and it's like, okay, you know what? I can't handle this heat anymore. I'm just not going to do it. And without that, you're going to lose a lot of performance, or you're going to lose the battery life on this thing within like half an hour to an hour when you're playing a game like Battlefield. So you have a very limiting situation when it comes to newer games and newer gen games, but it is still playable. Now let's get into some of the things that I don't really like about this, and then I'm going to move on to things that I actually didn't think I would use it for, but I do use it a lot for that, more than I actually play games. Either way, let's get into the things I don't like. First of all, it has this weird bug, and I don't know if it's mine specifically that does this, but when I want to log into Windows, sometimes, and just sometimes, the touchscreen doesn't want to open the keypad so that I can actually, enter my PIN. I have to go into the accessibility options, turn on the on-screen keyboard, and then just like put in the PIN and go on like that. And it's kind of a hassle. Otherwise, I have to restart the thing, which isn't the end of the world. Like, it restarts within seconds. So it's not the end of the world, but it's something to look out for if you don't want to like mess around and are not like tech savvy enough to go into the accessibility options, turn on the on-screen keyboard, go into Windows, do that again, possibly at some point. But most of the times, it works like perfectly, right? Then we're getting into the comfortability of this device. I see they did fix it with the newer edition of this same handheld gaming console. It actually has handlebars now, like the PlayStation 5, the handheld version of that, like it almost looks somewhat similar. There's a lot bigger. But otherwise, the comfortability is a bit sus. The thing is, this is kind of heavy, not that heavy, but if you're like sitting, kind of just playing a game like this, it will get a little bit heavy at some times, especially when you're sitting in bed and you don't have like an armrest or something to put your arms on. So it is a little bit difficult to play games like that. It kind of gives you limited mobility when you're playing a game. So if you're playing games that's a little bit more competitive, like Battlefield, for example, that can become somewhat of a problem. Not too big of a problem, but somewhat of a problem. Now, going into problems and accessibility and being tech savvy, it brings me to my next issue. If you're not tech savvy, you're just looking for a handheld gaming device that you can just plug in and play, it might not be the best case scenario. It'll still work. Don't get me wrong, it'll still work. But to be able to access most of this thing's performance, you're going to have to go into Armory Crate, which is an application that is like naturally installed into this device. And most ROG Strix or ASUS devices has this baked in. Like, I use it on my PC as well. And you can tune it to performance, eco, turbo mode, whatever the case may be. But that's the thing. Normal people that's not tech savvy at all will not necessarily know how to use most of that. So that's kind of a little bit of a learning curve, as you might say. And that goes for the back buttons as well. It has these two very handy back buttons. Also, the click is absolutely amazing. But it's not bound to anything. Like, if you're not going into the settings of the device itself, not even the games, of the device itself, you can't bind this to anything, or it doesn't do anything. You have to physically bind it to a key that would be on a keyboard like P or O. So normal people, yet again, will not be able to use these back buttons unless they do some research and actually go and like figure it out. So if you're giving this to like a 10-year-old kid that's not really tech savvy at all, or maybe haven't learned how to use a lot of these things, they're not going to use these back buttons at all. Now, there are ways to get around most of the issues of this thing, and I will get into that right after I go through the benefits of using this device and things that I didn't really think I was going to do. So stick around. And by the way, like this video and subscribe if you enjoy my content. I want to do more tech stuff, but I haven't been able to do it for some time now, but I'm getting back into it. So if you enjoy this type of videos, hit that subscribe button. I actually almost forgot to show you guys, and you probably saw this already, but There's the volume buttons at the top there as well. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, so I don't think it's too necessary to do that. Like the power button's right next to that as well. So if you didn't know, now obviously you know. When it comes to the joysticks of this device, you once again have to go into the settings and kind of adjust it to your liking. But I guess people playing on consoles usually won't really have a problem with that. Like, I'm a PC player, so all of this is new for me, and I've had to struggle to figure all of this out. But I did at the end of the day. So if I can do it, you can probably too, right? But apart from the comfortability, playing games on it is fairly comfortable. I want to say I would give it like a 60% comfortability score for playing normal games. If you're just lying in bed, vibing, playing some games, I think I expected to enjoy it more than I actually did. The thing is, I am a keyboard and mouse player. I'm very used to playing on a keyboard and mouse. So for me to go from that to the handheld gaming console, it is somewhat of a learning curve. Like I still have to get used to it to this day. I haven't played even closely as much as I thought I would, but it's not bad per se. Like, it performs pretty well considering it feels pretty smooth most of the time. And I haven't run into like weird issues, except for the fact that when it gets too hot, it doesn't want to charge anymore. And you most of the time have to have it on the charger to be able to actually play the games, which that brings me to the charger. This thing is pretty cool. It's long. It's like 2 meters long, if I'm not mistaken. It has USB Type-C, obviously, and it is rated at, I don't want to lie to you, I think it might be something like 125 watt or maybe even more than that. This charger has power delivery, which means you can charge anything with it. Your phone, your smartwatch, whatever has a USB Type-C connector to it, you can charge it because it actively and dynamically changes the amount of power that it sends to that device according to that device's specs. Now, with that out of the way, let's actually get into what I've been using this device for more than gaming, which is weird now that I say it out loud. I've been watching movies on this thing. Yes, it has incredibly good sound. Like, it's extremely loud, or at least loud enough for me to watch my Netflix anime on it. And because this is such a high resolution and bright screen, it looks absolutely fantastic. There's nothing wrong with watching things like Netflix on this device. You can comfortably put it right next to you against something and you can just watch it. It doesn't even have to be charged because then it actually doesn't use that much power, which means it lasts a lot longer. I've also been using this to like browse the web or do anything that I would do on a PC, but just not at my PC. Almost using it like a laptop, I would say. Now, all those caveats and negatives and stuff that I told you about when it comes to this device, there are a few ways around this, and one of the biggest and I think most well-known and well-used ways are just buying a docking station for this. It plugs into the USB Type-C, and then you have like 4 or 5 USB ports and whatever you need, where you can just plug in your, I don't know, keyboard and mouse. You can plug in the charger with all of that. Like, it has a fan on the backside and usually costs something like 1,000 Rand, 1,200 Rand. So you still get away with under 10,000 Rand for this device, and being able to plug in your keyboard, your mouse, your charger, maybe even a headset, whatever you want to do. You can do all of that, and it'll keep the device cool enough for you to actually be able to play some decent games. So that would be a massive win-win. Or you can go the more expensive route and get that ROG XG mobile docking station thing. Then you can just kind of plug it in and you have an external graphics device as well as a bunch of I/O ports. So that's also a win-win, but I'm guessing that's going to be a lot more expensive than just getting a docking station and playing your favorite games on there. So what do you think about the ASUS ROG Ally Extreme Z1? Would this be a good fit? Let me know in the comment section down below. It is definitely one of the more cheaper options, especially if you're going secondhand. I mean, if you're buying it new, I would just go for the Steam Deck maybe, or maybe even the newer ROG Ally. But either way, secondhand, this is one of the cheapest options, definitely good enough to play most of the games that you want to play. And from my side, I would give this a solid 7 out of 10 rating for comfortability, performance, and just being pretty cool. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more tech videos that I don't regularly do anymore, but I want to, slap a like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, everybody.